call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Cody, would you do a roll call of the board, please?
Supervisor Milky,
Here?
Treasurer Rice,
Here.
Trustee Brown,
Here.
Trustee Smith,
Here.
Clerk Cody here, Trustee Daring and Trustee Bills are excused.
Thank you. 5 of the 7 present. We have an agenda in front of us. Happy to entertain any motions regarding the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Support. I don't care.
Motion by Smith.
I don't care.
We'll give the support to Brown. To approve the agenda as presented. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. The agenda is in front of us now. We do have a presentation tonight. I don't know, Mr. Stuhldreher, do you have anything that you'd like to introduce here?
I'll just say a couple words and then bring Ms. Barnes up. We have the presentation of the audit results tonight. Ms. Allie Barnes, a principal with Yo and Yo, is with us. She will be giving us that presentation. You have all received your electronic copies today. We have hard copies that will be put in your mailboxes. And I also would be remiss if I did not thank and acknowledge Finance Director Ms. Sherry Teal for all the work that she put into getting this done. And with that, I'd ask Ms. Barnes to come up and lead us in what you have.
Well, thank you for having me tonight. It's amazing how fast time just flies by, because I feel like I was just standing up here, but a whole year has gone by. So I would like to start off also by thanking the finance director for all the work that she puts into the audit. Government finance continues to be more complicated. There's more rules, there's more accounting standards that come out, and it really can be a lot for smaller local governments to stay on top of, because you don't have a lot of people on your bench in your finance departments. And Sherry really does a good job staying on top of things and working with us to get us what we need to get the audit completed. So I want to make sure we thank her. All right, so the audit opinion, the reason that you essentially hire us to come in and take a look at your books. This year you received an unmodified or clean audit opinion, so that is no different than the opinion you have received for many, many years. It essentially means that we took a look at the information presented to us. It is following the rules that it is supposed to, and there are no material adjustments that we believe need to be made to the information in your final statements. So well done on that piece. We're going to touch on general fund here to start out with, and then we'll talk about a couple of the utility funds and go from there. So general fund revenues here for the last 5 years. You can see we were trending upwards, and then 2023 came down slightly. So in 2022, general fund had about 2.8 million in revenues. That was down to roughly 2.6 million for 2023. If we kind of look at the categories that we have here, you'll notice if we look in the center 3 columns, kind of the middle of the stack there is grayish in color. That represents local contributions. Significant portions of that is money that the DDAs contributed to the general fund for various road projects that were happening.
Bless you.
So 2023, you'll notice there is no gray portion in that block, which essentially is the majority of the reason that general fund revenue declined in 2023, just because you're not seeing those contributions coming in to help out with those projects. You'll notice that the portion that's kind of red in color there grew this year. That is your licenses and permits. So annually, that kind of depends on the activity within the township, and how much permitting you're doing, so that was up this year. And then, another area, that black portion towards the top there represents your interest or your investment income, money coming in. So your finance director, has done really well in making a lot of interest income for your township, so very good job being prudent about that while rates are up, making sure that you're taking full advantage of that. So very positive there. So we're gonna move on to expenditures, and when I move the page, so if we notice, we kind of have on our revenues, we went up for a few years and then down this year. When we get to expenditures, you're going to see the same trend, right? Which we would kind of expect to see if you have all those local contributions coming in to cover projects, you have projects happening in those years, then on the year that you don't have that funding coming in, you would hope that your expenditures are gonna come back down, some because of that. So here we have, for 2022, your expenditures were about 2.5 million versus, just over 2 million in 2023. So again, the majority of that is going to be related to projects that were happening. I think it was maybe Lincoln and Broomfield was in 2022. So that kind of peachish beige color in the middle is Public Works. That is where that project would have been recorded back in 2022. So you can see that that has shrunk back down, more in line with about 2020 fiscal year. All right, fund balance then. So we ended 2023 with about 6.7 million in total fund balance. So you'll see that overall fund balance did increase again this year. So that has been the trend for all the years presented here. The majority of your fund balance, that portion in the blue tealish color, is unassigned. So essentially there's no external restrictions on those dollars. They are free for you to use as you see fit for the township. There's a very, very small portion in assigned. Your budget for fiscal year 24 showed that you were expecting to spend just a very small amount of fund balance. So that's what makes up the line that you can barely even see on there. And then non-spendable, which is in red, again, very small. That's for making cash payments for items that are actually going to be expenditures in 2024. And that's been very consistent all along. Those type of items in those prepaids don't change too much. So the line on here represents your fund balance to expenditures ratio, which I know some people are usually curious about. So for you, in your expenditure level, you have a very healthy fund balance. So that is at 333%, which if you wanted me to grade you against my other clients, I'm not sure anybody has a fund balance that is that healthy. So that's obviously very prudent on your part, spending your dollars wisely. Also allows you to save up for projects when you know there's going to be one and you need to do something more significant. All right, we're gonna switch gears away from general fund. So for you, fire fund is another major fund when we look at it for audit purposes. So I wanna provide you with a little bit of information on that fund. You will see that the cash balance at the end of the year was roughly 1.2 million in that fund, which did exceed the fund balance amount of 1.1 million. So basically in that fund, all of fund balance is essentially cash, which isn't always the case, and I know that really confuses people sometimes, but for this particular fund, it is kind of one and the same. And your expenditures stayed really, really flat compared to the previous year. Those came in at about 832,000. So one thing to point out, I know sometimes I get questions in something like a fire fund, like why why would we want the cash and our fund balance to keep increasing in this fund? Does it mean, we're levying too many mills? But as you know, within funds like the fire fund, when there is an equipment need and you have to make that contribution for a large piece of equipment, a fire truck, you need to have those funds built up so that you can make those contributions. So I think you're fine where you're at right now. The prices for those pieces of equipment have just skyrocketed even more. If you can get them, I know people are still having lots of delays, but I think it's prudent that you have a fund balance sitting there to make sure you can cover those. All right, the water fund. So here for 2023, your total revenues came in at about 2 million, and your total expenses came in at about 1.7 million. So again, you are adding to the bottom line within this fund. Really like to see that your revenues at least hold pace with your expenses. If they can exceed them a little bit, that's even better. But what that means to me is that you are covering all of your current operating costs, including your depreciation. So even though in a year you may not have a cash outlay for some type of improvement in your system, you do always have depreciation expense, and if you can be covering that, that's really important. Not all entities are able to do that, or they run just really close to barely covering it. So I always kind of look at that and like to see that you're covering all of your operating expenses. And then the other piece that I like to look at within the utility type funds is your working capital. So you can see here that has continued to increase. It's at about 3.9 million. Again, that just significantly helps when you have major improvements, emergency repairs that can get really costly, so that you can afford to pay for those outright. So we'll look at the same kind of information here in the sewer fund. So sewer fund had total revenues this year of about 3.7 million versus expenses of 2.6 million. So again, able to cover those expenses in this fund as well. And then this fund had an increase in working capital for 2023, and that comes in at about 4 million. All right, switching gears kind of away from the numbers, I want to talk about internal controls and compliance. So obviously you're aware that we don't look at just the numbers while we're here. We look at internal controls. There's many different compliance requirements we have to ensure you are following. So we do have a couple items to note on here. The first one is that we did have to include a material weakness this year. And I want to explain kind of the situation because it's not a usual kind of transaction. So Mission Creek Drain is a county project that had bonded debt. Well, part of the bonded debt actually names the township. So there's a portion of that debt that the township is responsible for. So when that happens, the county should be communicating all of that information to the township so that the township can then record their share of the debt within the township financial statements. So somewhere along the lines, there was a communication breakdown, and that information did not make it to the finance department so that they could record that. It was not discovered in the audit. It was actually discovered after last year's audit, and Sherry reached out to us and said, hey, now I know about this. What do we need to do about it? And the answer is we just need to get it recorded this year. So it's recorded now, a very one-off situation. These drains are really hard because this happens a lot, that there will be a drain out there that you have a portion of the debt that you're responsible for, and you may not really realize it. So I wouldn't say this is a pervasive issue at all. Again, kind of a one and done thing. Now Sherry's kind of more aware that this is a situation that could happen out there, so she can kind of be looking for it and, you know, listening for red flags, as to whether or not she hears anything else to be recorded. So I'll pause and see if you have any questions on that one before I move on.
So is the lien or the debt that the township is responsible, is that essentially an assessment district? And we just have property there, or why would the township be named in that if we don't have property there, in that drain district? Do you know?
If your township isn't in it, I guess I'm not sure.
There is what they call an at-large component, and that at-large, and it's a term that's used, within the drainage district, there is benefit to the general town, to the entire township, if you will, at large. And so within the district, we will have parcels of property that we own that we will be billed for our share of that part, like a parcel, like a homeowner. And then there's this at-large share as well. And that is what that represents our portion of the debt, the at-large.
Yeah, I was not aware of the at-large piece of this before.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah. So, I was gonna say, I think the amount was roughly 400,000 or so is what was added. So, I mean, really for your township, it's not too significant, obviously payable over a number of years, but I have seen this happen before where we're adding millions and millions for one of these. So they're definitely out there and can be a lot more. So, okay, moving on then. We did not identify any significant deficiencies this year, but we did have one management comment. And this partially stems from a change in the auditing standards this year. So this did not impact anything necessarily the township had to do on the accounting side, but the auditing standards had some changes to them that were effective at the beginning of 2024. And one of those requires us to look even more at the journal entry process and to call out deficiencies within that process more if we see them. So within your township, there are journal entries that get posted, but they're not always reviewed by a second person. And so journal entries are a way within the general ledger that if somebody wanted to do something perhaps inappropriate, if they were misappropriating funds at all, that is a way that they could do it. And if there isn't somebody watching those journal entries or watching the financial statements in general, then they're obviously a lot more likely to get away with it. So we really recommend when people are posting journal entries that there's always a second person looking at them. Sometimes I know it's really hard within local government to get that second person because they don't always have the most in-depth accounting knowledge to know, is this exactly technically right? And when that happens, that's okay. I tell people, you have to look at the entry, maybe talk it out with whoever created the entry, and say to yourself, does this seem reasonable to me? Does the situation seem reasonable? Does it involve cash? Does it involve some type of asset that's being decreased? And does it make sense that the asset's being decreased? So even though maybe you don't have a second person who knows all of the GASB and all of GAAP, I think you still can identify someone that has enough knowledge to say, is what's being recorded reasonable? You can also look at your financial statements, which I know that you do, which is why this is only a management comment. And make sure, you know, when you look at financial statements, if something seems off to you, to just keep asking about it so that you understand why it is the way it is, because it could be that journal entries are why it ended up there, and that's kind of like another layer of review. So just want to bring that to your attention. Again, the auditing standards are really making sure we're we're watching this particular area. And so I do think it's important. I understand that it's hard to maybe get the level of control that the auditing standards would like, but I do think you can do something to have some mitigating controls in there. And with that, if you have other questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Oh, I feel bad. I have a few.
Go for it.
This was a comment first, the interest income that you lifted up. I want to give kudos to our finance director as well, to the point where sometimes when I'm reviewing township records at home, I have to call to my wife and say, let me tell you something. And I very often I've lifted up the interest that we're recognizing in the township, which is really phenomenal. The question I had, with regards to 2024, so this will come into next year, we have moved some ARPA funds into the general budget. Does that show up as traditional income? We'll see that in that graph as a big income jump. Right now, it's in its own fund.
Yes.
Well, last year it was.
Yeah, so if you recognize the revenue in general fund in 2024, then yes, it will show up.
So that'll be part of our graph next year. Okay.
Yeah, and that will likely, I'll show it as a separate category.
I'm sorry?
I'll likely show that as a separate
Separate one?
category.
Yeah, because it's sizable enough that it'll show up separate, yeah. Okay. And then I think the only other question I had, and this maybe is better for a manager, you were talking about the fire fund and building that cash reserve for big equipment purchases. And that's exactly how we view this as a board is every so many years we plan on having to replace a fire truck. And I just wanted to ask, I forgot the term that is. Do you happen to know off the top of your head the term that we plan on for that?
I want to say 20 years.
That's okay. That's what I was remembering, but I wasn't sure.
So we levy a millage. We're authorized up to 2.5, Sherry, that's right?
Yes.
And we may or may not levy up to that. I believe we are right now. That voted millage was approved a couple years ago for 10 years. And we do two things with that revenue. We save up for a fire truck that we purchase every 20 years or so that goes into the fleet at the city. And then every year, and in 2024, I think it's around $900,000 is the contractual payments to the city for the provision of fire service.
You had talked about it, maybe wanted that question, so
Yeah.
my apologies for taking your time on that.
No, that's
Otherwise,
right.
I'm all good.
I'm all set.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
Thank you.
coming again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just shout out to our finance director. Thanks for all you did. I know it's a lot, but appreciate it. That finishes item 5 in our presentations. That brings us to public hearings, which we have none. So moving to item 7 on the agenda, public comment. Public comment is restricted to 3 minutes regarding items on this agenda. Note, if you choose to address the public, please state your name and address for the record. And with that, we'll open up public comment at 7:24 p.m.
Is this for anything on the agenda?
I'm sorry?
Is this for anything on the agenda?
Anything on the agenda? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Bill Irvin, and I own property with my brothers down here. It's a 40-acre parcel. And I read the request for board action regarding private drives and driveways. I did have a few questions on that. First, one of the things I noticed is that it goes to the planning commission, and there was no appeal from the planning commission. It says that you can turn around and appeal right away if you want to, if you're turned down by the planning commission. My concern with that is that if you're turned down and you want to appeal, that you're probably going to have fees and stuff that you're going to have to pay again in order to appeal. The other thing is that the planning commission, although I respect their work, they are appointed by the township board, so there's no people who are elected that you can appeal to, such as the township board. And it doesn't look like you can go to the zoning board of appeals either on this matter. It looks like this is a police power ordinance. And zoning and police power ordinance are not the same, and they shouldn't be mixed together. The reason I say it looks like it's a police power ordinance is because there's no appeal from the planning commission, what their decision is. The other thing that concerns me about this is that there's no grandfather clause. In other words, those people who have a private road or private drive-in, if this is passed, then they could be made to have theirs conform to the ordinance. And I think that's kind of unfair to them. Now, I think there's only about 10 private drives in the township right now. And most of those are on the west side. And so I don't know what the, why it's such a need when you only have 10 private drives in. And the other thing is, if I'm on a private road, I'm not, but if I was on a private road and this ordinance passes and they come out and tell me that I've got to do something to get up to the standards of this particular ordinance, then it's going to cost me and my neighbors money in order to do that. I think that this would have the effect of stymieing development too in the township if it's passed the way it is. And I guess my question is, what's the benefit to the township since we only have 10 private roads? And being that it's a police ordinance, a zoning and police power ordinance are not the same and should not be mixed together. That's a court case that's been done. And again, you can call it what you want, but if there's no appeal, then in effect, it's a police ordinance that you're passing. And I have some issues with that, there's no right to appeal a police ordinance like that. The other thing is, in regards to that, there should be something that grandfathers those properties in. Now when they put it in according to what the township rules were at that time. And it seems to me like this ordinance changes the rules in the middle of the game. So those are some issues that I have with that ordinance. And I just wanted to bring that up to see if any of you thought about that when you looked at that ordinance. So, and the other thing, I see one of your board members is missing tonight.
2.
Two. Okay. I think this is such an important issue that I think the full board ought to be here before they make that decision. So because of that, I'd like to see you table this for tonight and not make a decision until we have the full board here. Okay, thank you.
Would you just state your address? I don't believe you did,
Oh.
for the record.
Yeah, 1200 Buckingham Place,
Thank you. Appreciate you coming here.
Mount Pleasant. Thank you.
Just so you know, there's a couple of questions that I'm going to try to answer when we get to that spot in the agenda.
You got a couple questions?
No, a couple of the questions that you asked, I know the answers to, and I'm going to try to address those when we get into discussion about this.
All right.
Is there anybody connected remotely? Anybody else?
I'm driving.
Okay. Seeing no one else coming forward, we'll close public comment at 7:31 PM. Thank you. That brings us to item 9 on our agenda, reports, boards, and comments. Current list of boards and commissions. A note, we have 1 seat on the planning commission and 1 seat on the board of review. So continue to shake the coffers or whatever in the community. Previous member that has stepped away from the board of review happened to be a realtor, which is a nice trait to have on the board of review. Moving on, board member reports. Clerk Cody. Trustee Brown.
No report tonight.
Trustee Smith.
The County Board of Commissioners at their work session on June 4th. A lot of routine items, but they did roll out the first draft of their budget for next year. Not line items, but it was by department, and a lot of thought obviously went into it. So they went from the zero base and they had to add in a few more items. So the actual budget that as is right now has a negative $590,000, so a use of fund balance at that point, which is significantly less than what they started off with. But they also have 500 and some thousand in contingency, so they are going to be juggling some stuff back and forth. I know at their meeting yesterday, their work session meetings, they were going over draft 2. So it'll probably be more information coming out there. Just a lot of different things that they kind of highlighted. They maintained the road patrol through the end of the year per discussion with the sheriff's department and staff. So that way, so if they go for the millage vote in November, that, you know, they're not going to be laying people off October 1. So they're fully funding it regardless of the outcome through the end of December. So that is a big factor on why that shows as it is. So so next week draft number 2 comes out, which should be a little bit more interesting, and hopefully, you know, a little bit more minutia in the details, but they're progressing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Treasurer Rice.
Tax time is upon us. So, taxes should be in mailboxes the week of the July 1st, so keep your eye out.
Very good.
That's it.
Thank you. I don't have much to report. I was not at the last board meeting because I was on vacation. Thanks for running the meeting. I did watch our last meeting. So with that, we'll move on to item 10, consent agenda. Happy to entertain any motions with that. And Trustee Smith had warrants.
Warrants were in line. I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
Motion by Smith, support by Rice. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to new business, item A. Consider adoption of new private road ordinance as ordinance number 24-01. Couple comments, and I'll hand it off to our manager for an introduction. Trustee Thering, who's our planning commission liaison, is on vacation this week. He did send an email requesting that he would like to be part of the discussion that we have on this. So I promised that I would relay that. And then just as a note, I hope I'm able to answer some questions because I think they're good points regarding the private road ordinance that was first undertaken by the Board of Trustees. And then we essentially asked the planning commission, who doesn't have legal authority over this, for their input because it has potential to touch areas that they are responsible for, which has to do with zoning, permitting, those types of things. And so they don't really have any legal authority over the decision. There is no legal authority over the decision they made. It's just a recommendation to this board. So at this point, no legal action has taken place with the exception of public hearings. Is that helpful a little bit? And just a note too, that the private road ordinance that's being proposed replaces one that we had in 2000. That was the last time this township amended or created. I don't know if it was the original road ordinance, but our road ordinance is from 2000. And so the intent of this was to modernize it and use some best practices. And so you can object certainly with content, but I just want to make it clear that this is updating what's been termed a police powers ordinance. It's not part of the zoning at all. And so planning commission, that's why they don't have purview over this particular process, other than we ask their input. I hope that helps.
Well, that's where you go to the planning commission to get approval, right?
We just asked them to look at it. And so their vote at their last meeting was a recommendation for this board.
I mean, if I want to permit for a private road, I have to go through the planning commission.
I don't know the answer to that. Are you willing to answer that? Do you know?
Not without asking Rodney.
Okay. I'll try to get an answer for you on that at some point, and it may come out through tonight as well. And with that, Mr. Stuhldreher, you can introduce this if you'd like.
Be happy to. I think I will ask, just a point of clarification. With Trustee Thering out and Trustee Bill's out, do you suppose we ought to go through this now or wait till next meeting?
I would be fine tabling it so
I'd
that
be-
we have
I'd soon
everybody.
table it.
Yeah.
Happy to talk about it, but then we're just kind of being redundant.
Yeah.
Right.
My preference would be to include all of our trustees as well, but I would like the opportunity to, if there are trustees that have questions, for them to voice them now.
Yep.
That'll help us be more productive in the next meeting.
Okay.
Is that reasonable?
Then I will go through my notes that I had for this item, and then you can make your motions or do whatever you want to do.
Thank you.
At that point. Yep. So before you tonight, we're asking for consideration to adopt a new private road ordinance. Has been pointed out, it is a general ordinance. It is not part of the zoning code. There's a report that begins on page 21 of your agenda packet. I'll point out that a private road is any road or street that is privately developed, owned, and maintained within a right-of-way or easement to provide vehicle access to more than one lot, dwelling, or business. Private roads are not under the jurisdiction of the county road commission. They're not under the jurisdiction of any state road authority, MDOT, or anything like that. But the township and the county do recognize them as roads for addressing purposes, public safety purposes, and a variety of other reasons. The current ordinance, as was noted, is 24 years old and I think has outlived its usefulness. And it was time. We've been going through a whole series of ordinance updates over the last several years, and this is the time to consider whether the board wants to update this ordinance as well. This ordinance was developed in consultation with the township attorney, public services director, planning commission, and we use the planning commission because they are, one, they're citizens, they're engaged citizens. They have some knowledge of the subject matter, if nothing else through osmosis. They deal with roads and on-site plans and all that, so they are a good venue for us to seek input from and vet these types of things. We also met with at least one private citizen. So we have, the point there is we've solicited, I think, a lot of public input. And as you'll see in a minute, we've actually had 3 meetings with the Planning Commission so that they could understand it. Board of Trustees, you've already had a first reading, an introduction, so you've kind of gone through this already. You've had a second reading, and I'll get to some of those changes that have occurred in just a moment. This ordinance addresses several clear elements that we think the existing ordinance is lacking. It does allow and create a clear private road permit approval process. The public safety related items and issues are what we're, in terms of standards and widths and heights clearances, we're just trying to create an environment on the ground where we are ensured that public safety is being addressed. It does also include a standard and an approval process for road names. That you may think that's neither here nor there, but private road could be possibly named anything without some control, so we have provisions in that. There are some updated road design standards for these private roads, primarily having to do with width and clearance height above that, again, for public safety. There are some fees attached with this ordinance, as we have with many of our ordinances, some performance guarantee provisions, opportunities to escrow some funds that are eventually returned to the payer if not utilized. And then there's provisions within the ordinance that address violations and penalty provisions. Since the second reading of the ordinance, some highlighted changes that have occurred. If there's a denial, the first draft required a waiting period of a year. That's been eliminated, so you can turn around and apply more or less immediately. Now you have the knowledge of whatever the denial was, whatever caused the denial. You could rectify that in your plans and immediately turn around and apply again. We did clarify some of the inspection and escrow provisions that were in the first document, just trying to create clarity, and some of this came from the input with the private citizens and the Planning Commission. And we did add some clarifications to some of the definitions because that is really one of the key things, is making sure we're defining what we're talking about here. In terms of public input during the process, March 13th, the Board of Trustees introduced and held a first reading for this. March 21st, it was posted as required by rule, both on the Township website, Township Hall, the Morning Sun newspaper. March 27th, the Board of Trustees held a second reading. While all this was going on, there were 3 Planning Commission meetings where we were seeking their input. We were just simply asking them if they wanted to make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees as to whether or not the Board of Trustees ought to consider this. Yes, no, with changes. They had to learn there was a lot of confusion about private and public roads, and the discussions would often confuse those and you get off track a little bit. But at the end of the day, at their May 21st meeting, after discussing this during their 3 meetings. There was a vote out of the Planning Commission to recommend adoption. That vote was 6-2. I think if there are more technical questions, we of course have Mr. Nanny here to answer those. Be happy to ask or answer any questions the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll ask one, and and this is just me not knowing or not reading or seeing it in here. If it were to pass, does the other, from the past, everybody have to bring it up to code? Or are they grandfathered in?
We are not aware, and we've looked, that there are any private roads in the township today that are in violation of this ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
We've had some claims that there are, but when we ask the question, where, show us, we're not provided an answer.
Perfect, thank you. Appreciate the answer.
Just a note, I think I answered this myself, but a question I had today was there is a trigger that happens in the ordinance. It happens in the existing ordinance, and it also happens in the proposed new ordinance to replace that one. But there's a trigger that can happen where if a private road is servicing a certain number of properties, then it essentially elevates it to having to meet ICRC or the Road Commission's standards. And I believe in the original, so please correct me if I get this wrong, because this is what I took from everything. In the existing, I think it's triggered on the 14th property that's serviced by the road. In the new ordinance, it is set at 9, I believe, because there was some concern from some residents that I heard about that triggering mechanism. But it's existed for 24 years. What is changing is the number that triggers that. Is your understanding that that's accurate?
I'd like Mr. Nanny to address that.
I certainly can address that. I would actually suggest that you look at this differently. It's not a trigger mechanism for an
Maybe a
increase
bad
in-
choice of words.
Well, but it's not, because you have to think of it this way. The base standard actually is that private roads need to meet the same standards as the Road Commission has established for its local gravel roads. And what this ordinance says is that for certain small projects, that there's a reduced standard. So it actually lowers the requirements for certain small projects. And in this case, it's 8 lots, up to 8 lots. And you do have to try to draw the line somewhere. And what we're attempting to do was say that basically meet the county standard, which has been in place for 30 years. They have not altered it. It's the same standard that applied when our current ordinance was adopted. So meet that standard for most private roads. However, if you're building a small project, a few lots, a short section road with a few lots, we have a reduced standard that would apply. And the idea is that for that reduced number of lots, that smaller road width, less material, that reduced standard for that small project is reasonable to cover those few lots. The issue is basically, again, we're very much focused on public safety. And once you get to a certain point, in order to serve those lots from an emergency response perspective, from public safety perspective, the road needs to meet those same standards that apply to any other county local gravel road. The idea is that for a few lots, in this case up to 8, that we can work with that with a smaller standard. So it's not triggering upward, it's actually giving a reduction, it'll make it easier to develop a small project by having a reduced standard for those.
I appreciate your answer, thank you. Just a note, I was going to go to the public safety next because I wanted clarification on that, or maybe more of a statement. But one of the things that that was important to me reading through the ordinance was that public safety aspect, to make sure that if you're living in a small unplatted neighborhood, I hope those are reasonable words to use. Public safety was an issue, and if your house gets on fire, we need to know that a fire truck can have access and get in there. And so that was my number one issue, I guess, as I looked at this, that I was glad to see we're trying to address that. Is that accurate from your perspective?
Yes.
Thank you.
No,
Trustee
correct me
Smith?
if I'm wrong. If you're putting a building on one of these lots, wouldn't the emergency vehicle access road be a part of the building site plan process and not necessarily have to be a part of this? So like I've got private road and I want to build a house. Site plan review would have to include some emergency access to this, correct?
To,
To get to my house on the private road.
So the building permit really just looks at the property itself. So it looks at the driveway, it looks at and the house. So that's really what the building review does. The private road standards are that really comes up when the lots are created, because the lots are required to front on either a public road or an approved and constructed private road.
So that'd be more like if you're platting a subdivision, for example, so that the road access, the capabilities is not part of the building site plan. That is like the pre-platting of the properties.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Good one. Other questions?
I have another
Yeah,
question.
please.
On the one right here, you've got minimum road right away of 66 feet. And I think the actual, if you're update lots, the actual road itself was 22. What would be the need for the extra easement?
So the standard right-of-way width for local roads under the County Road Commission, and in virtually every community, is 66 feet. And certainly part of that is used for the road, but part of it's also used for the shoulders beyond the pavement, either paved or gravel shoulders, depending on the type of road, drainage, drainage ditches, swales, that sort of thing. And then in addition to that, utilities. So it's telephone, electric, gas, fiber optic, whatever might be coming in. All those utilities are running within that 66-foot wide right-of-way.
Okay.
And I don't believe that's different from the existing. Is that accurate?
Right, that is correct, it's the same.
I just happened, that was one of the things I checked against between the two ordinances.
And just, sorry if I
No,
hog it up
please
the
do,
time.
please.
So,
No, I'm glad
on
you're
section
asking
14,
questions.
when you've got the minimum specifications for private roads and you got the listing right here of all that, was that done by an engineering company or was this taken from existing like road commission specs, or where was that information gathered?
This is as recommended by the Township engineers, as recommended based on current civil engineering specifications.
So civil engineers have looked at these, right? Okay. Okay. A lot of your questions were the same ones I had, so I'm, and I guess my final one is, was the old ordinance in such bad shape? Because usually when we like redo ordinances and stuff, it's sometimes easier to see what was in the old one and the new one where you do a strikeout. Was the old one in such bad shape that it was just too cumbersome to do the strikeout and it was easier just to start from scratch? Can I assume that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. It was not in a format that could be easily updated in terms of underline the strikeout text.
Because I think that's one thing in the conversations that I'm having is that people, I think, don't understand that the ordinance 2000-9 is out there. And I think they also don't realize that was one of my earlier questions was answered earlier is why is this a general or police powers ordinance rather than zoning? And I think it was stated that the 2000-9 was a police powers one as well, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I think the other question is that the planning commission, I saw it in section 10, the planning commission does review and approve any of these plans. That's correct, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess that one of the main things that I kind of hear out there is, and it was brought up in public comment, is the right to appeal. And I think I brought that up at another ordinance that was brought up, the stormwater last year, when there was not the appeal to the ZBA. And I voiced that as a concern back then, and so it still remains kind of as a concern of mine, just that, you know, giving the public the right to go to a board of their peers to appeal. And so that's where I kind of feel that there should be a different appeals process. Not taking anything away from staff or anything like that, but I think people just like the ability to go talk to their peers and plead their case. So I'm not, you know,
Just for my clarification, I understand your comment is, there's not a clear or an appeal process laid out. There is an ability to reapply, but then I think the issue there is you're applying to the same folks, right? And that
yes,
this gives you different venues, what you're
different
suggesting.
venue and stuff like that, just kind of, and so you're not having to go and re-engage engineers' time and re-engage all these other things that you got to incur costs. You can just go right to the appeals. So that's where I just have a question, and I would say a concern at this point.
And if I may,
Please?
that appeal question came up in either the first or the second reading as well. And at that time, and it still is, the response of the administration that in our minds, the specifications are very clear, very specific. And this isn't, there's just not a lot of room for interpretation. So if we're appealing specifications and those kinds of things, we don't see the need for an appeal process. If we're appealing whether or not it should be permitted or not, then I think we're talking about a completely different, then we're wondering if the ordinance should even be adopted. So,
Okay. Yes, I agree. It is very technical. I do see your point on that.
I
But
just
also
wanted to bring that up as
Yeah.
a past conversation we'd had.
But I also see the public's point of view.
Oh, yeah.
They
Yeah.
they
Oh, yeah.
like to have that. It's that perception is
Yeah.
stronger than
Oh, yeah.
reality sometimes.
Yeah.
Thought.
And I know being a planning commissioner, you're not given latitude on some of that stuff either. I mean, if
Right.
you meet the zoning, you meet the requirements, you don't have a right to vote no on an application.
Yeah.
Which helps, because I took that very seriously as a planning
Mhm.
commissioner. I know Clerk Cody served as a planning commissioner, and same attitude.
Yeah.
Because there were lots that I didn't like, the development, but I'm like, but they meet everything, so I gotta say yes.
So
I appreciate your questions.
So I'm done with my questions.
Well, everybody have their questions answered at this point that we have today, at least? So.
I make a motion.
You may.
Make a motion to table this conversation until management brings it up on the next meeting, whatever it may be, whenever the next meeting or future meeting,
It will be the June 26th meeting.
for the June 26th meeting.
I believe I have that date correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll support.
We have a motion by Brown, support by Smith. Any discussion on that? I'll just note that Trustee Thering, I'm sure will be glad to be part of discussion, so speaking on his behalf of his appreciation. So we have a motion to table item A until our June 26th meeting. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion, item A is tabled until the June 26th meeting. Thank you, board.
Good. Thank you.
Moving on to new business, item B. This is our fourth step in the Fox Meadow Estates and 1 and 2 paving special assessment district. This is just for the public, because I get a lot of questions on this about the road assessment process that some subdivisions go through. What we do Union Township is follow the state law. These steps that we have to go through, although they may seem like a lot of red tape sometimes, serve a purpose to make sure that because we're creating a tax assessment district, the people that are being taxed have multiple opportunities to come and voice their concerns or support for it. And so I just want to say that again. And with that, Mr. Stuhldreher, do you have anything you'd like to introduce on this?
Just briefly, the report begins on page 40 of your agenda packet. We're asking consideration for the adoption of Fox Meadow Estates and Fox Meadow Estates number 2 subdivisions paving special assessment district resolution number 4, and set the date for the second and final public hearing on this matter to be held on June 26th, 2024 at 7 p.m. This project involves the completion of a mill and ultra-thin 1-inch overlay on Hunter's Trail, Brittany Drive, Stony Creek Lane, and Meadows Drive. The purpose of this resolution in front of you tonight, it confirms that the completed special assessment roll be given to the township clerk and made available for public inspection. It sets the date and time for the second public hearing, and it directs the township clerk, with the support of staff, of course, to give proper notice of such hearing by mailing and publication. And if you have any questions, be happy to answer them.
I'd just like to make a comment. I do appreciate at the last planning commission meeting when Director Nanny, they kind of got sidetracked into special assessment discussion, and he kind of laid it out in a concise way again. I think anytime that can be discussed and kind of out there, so I do want to commend you on that explanation that you gave that night. That's all I have. I'll make the motion.
Sure.
Make the motion to adopt the Fox Meadows Estate and Fox Meadows Estates 2 subdivision paving special assessment district number 4, which sets the second public hearing date and time for June 26, 2024 at 7 p.m. for the establishment of a paving special assessment district.
Support.
Motion by Smith, support by Rice. So as you're proposing, we'll have another item on our agenda for the June 26th. Any further discussion on this item? This is a resolution. Clerk Cody, would you like to do a roll call of this?
Supervisor Milky,
Yes?
Treasurer Rice,
Yes.
Trustee Smith,
Yes.
Trustee Brown,
Yes.
Clerk Cody, yes.
Resolution passes unanimously. Thank you, Clerk Cody. That moves us to item 11C on the agenda, Lincoln Road Participation Agreement with Isabella County Road Commission. I'm sure you've all read in what's in your packet. Mr. Stuhldreher, would you like to introduce this?
Thank you, and there's a report that begins on page 50 of your agenda packet. We're asking for the Board of Trustees to consider approval of the Lincoln Road Participation Agreement with the Isabella County Road Commission in the amount of $372,492.27. Lincoln Road is local county road located in the township with a Paisley rating of 1 and 2, depending on the section. Those are the lowest, the lower the number, the worse the condition of the road along that stretch. And we're talking about the stretch from Broomfield to south to Deerfield. Along that stretch of road is the Mount Pleasant water treatment plant, about a dozen residential homes, and the Sacred Heart School has some baseball and softball fields along that stretch as well. The township, in partnership with the Road Commission, applied for and was awarded 2% funding to help pay for this project. What we'd be doing is pulverizing, repaving Lincoln Road, and then also that would include, it does include 4-foot shoulders. The existing shoulder is 3 foot. If we wanted anything wider, it would require a complete reconstruct. They did agree that they could put in 4 shoulders, so we're getting an extra foot.
Nice.
There's curb and gutter installation being installed around Lincoln and Deerfield. And that is primarily because of that intersection for the county road commission is a very high maintenance intersection as it's currently constructed. And if you've been out there, you can see how people are turning and making the corners wider and wider because they get off the road. So there's some of that going on as well. The cost sharing is as follows. Union Township would be using our portion of our ARPA funds, $247,000. The tribe 2% award of $125,000, and the Road Commission $125,000. Total cost of this improvements $497,000, and it would be done this construction season.
Nice.
I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Is this gonna be a Class A road?
Yes, yes. Class
Okay,
A.
I assumed when I saw the
Yeah.
4-inch pave, I thought it was gonna,
Yeah.
okay, and the price. I was hoping that it was gonna be Class A. And I just had a second question, it was kind of related to this. We had earlier discussions about possibly doing Meridian Road.
Mhm.
Is that still kind of in the tentative plans, or?
We had made an application with the township, road commission, and Deerfield Township, 2% funding, to do that road. That, we were not awarded that grant from the tribe. We have reached out to the administrator at the road commission because Union Township still has an interest in trying to do something on Meridian Road. And so those discussions, I'm not sure if they've begun yet, but they are aware that we're still interested in pursuing something there. Just don't know all the details yet.
Okay,
Is that a fair statement?
thank you.
If I had to guess, we may have to, it's 3 miles that we were looking at doing. We may end up doing that over a couple of years, just because of the cost that's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make a
Melissa?
motion? Good? Everybody good? Motion to approve the, I don't have my glasses, so bear with me. I wonder if I can zoom this in. Hey, I can zoom it in. Oh,
Does somebody need to read it off for you? You take
yeah,
credit for the
yeah,
motion?
Might have to. Make a motion to approve the participation contract for Lincoln Road from Deerfield Road to, I'm sorry.
Broomfield Road?
Broomfield Road, yeah, it's Deerfield to Broomfield, it's right next to my house, you'd think I know. I'm cutting my screen off, so I don't have the whole thing in front of me. Broomfield Road with the Isabella County Road Commission, ICRC for the grind and 4-inch pave and curb and gutter installation at the Lincoln and Deerfield Road intersection in the amount of $372,492.27, and to authorize the township manager to sign said contract.
Support.
Motion by Brown, support by Cody. Other discussion?
Beautifully done.
I'll just note, this road has needed this for a long time, so I'm excited for the possibility of getting this done. So I'm fully in support of this.
Yeah, I drove down the road today, phase 1 or phaser 1, I think that's a high mark for that road. I think it's like .42 or something, I mean, it's gotta be below 1.
Yeah.
But no, well, it's gonna be nice to have that end of it all taken care of down there after the work since 2022 on now. It's all gonna be straightened out.
And a note for the public, if Trustee Brown just used the term Pazer rating, Pazer ratings go from 0 to 10. 1 is not good. It's just about as bad as you get.
I'm getting down low when we get below 1.
Any other discussion? This is a resolution. Would you do a roll call vote of the board, please? Everybody clear on the motion?
Yes.
Supervisor Milky?
Yes.
Clerk Cody, yes. Treasurer Rice?
Yes.
Trustee Brown?
Yes.
Trustee Smith?
Yes.
Supervisor Milky? Did I already say you?
You did, and I
Okay,
said
then
yes. Do I
everybody's
get to
good.
vote twice?
No.
Chicago style.
Yes.
All yeses.
I will not make another motion without my glasses, I'm done.
You did
Thank you,
good.
thank you, board. That passes unanimously, correct?
Yes.
And with that, we finish our new business. That takes us to extended public comment. Extended public comment is restricted to 5 minutes regarding any issue. If you choose to address the public, please state your name and address for the record. And with that, we'll open up extended public comment at 8:10 p.m. Do we have anybody connected remotely?
We do not.
Seeing no one coming forward, we'll call or close extended public comment at 8:10 p.m. That brings us to item 13 on the agenda, manager's comments. Mr. Stuhldreher, you have the floor.
Thank you, and just a couple brief ones. One, we have had a request for a proposal out on the streets to redesign our webpage. Those proposals are due tomorrow, I believe. So just give you, it's a budgeted items. That's where that is. I also like to announce a new employee, a new hire for the organization with the promotion, as you may recall, of Andy Fussman to wastewater treatment plant superintendent or assistant superintendent. That created an opening for a wastewater treatment plant operator. We have filled that position. We received 3 applications for that. None of the applications had the required state of Michigan Class D licensing, and only one of those had had any experience at all in a wastewater treatment plant. That's how difficult these kind of positions can be to fill. 2 of the folks were interviewed. One of them never called back when we tried to schedule an interview, but we're very happy with the candidate that's been chosen. Both candidates were interviewed. Both candidates toured the wastewater treatment plant. You want to make sure that they recognize kind of the work environment, because it doesn't work for necessarily everybody. You know, the environment, and it just allowed for some more one-on-one interaction with the superintendent and some of the staff over there. The consensus was to offer the position to a Mr. Matthew Rabish. He was the most qualified of the 2. He has a degree in public health. He has an interest in the wastewater field. Mr. Rabish is from the local area. We thought that was beneficial and has some roots in the community, so we're hopeful that this might be a long-term relationship. Mr. Rabish will start June 24th, and there was a lot of discussion with Mr. Rabish regarding our requirement that he needs to obtain the Class D license within a year of employment. He's all on board with that. So I'm happy to announce that he'll be joining the organization June 24th.
Perfect.
That's great.
Just a couple others. All the Board of Review members' terms expire at the end of this year. So we should keep that in mind. That by statute, those are 2-year terms, and they're all expiring at the end of this year. I think we kind of talked about the bonded drain issue, and that is on my radar. We have received notice of, I think it's the roads drain, that sort of feels like it might be, the maintenance might be going to the level where it requires more resources than the county drain commissioner has immediately available. So I don't anticipate that item getting past the township again. And then as it relates to the journal reviews, journal entry review, I will let you know that yesterday a stack of them about this tall for the month of January was delivered to my desk. So that'll be a second set of eyes on those. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for our manager?
No.
Moving on, final board member comment, item 14 on the agenda. Clerk Cody? Trustee Brown?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I'd like to thank management for when we went to work on the Lincoln Road project, that we were able to get 4-foot shoulders. I think that's very important over there. with living right there in that area, to see what the usage of the 6-foot shoulders that we put in down Broomfield gets, which is a lot of people walking, a lot of bikes. I see it every day. And I think that's gonna be a big benefit for the ball fields for Sacred Heart, that they can get foot traffic and bike traffic, non-vehicle traffic, to that field. They do put a lot of people in that area, several days a week, so. No, I just wanna say outstanding, for getting I don't know who's responsible for really pushing those 4-foot, but I know the board and how we are here at Union Township, that we push for the non-motorized traffic.
The conversations were held between the road commission and Ms. Smith, but we all recognize that all of us in Union Township recognize the importance of maximizing paved shoulders wherever possible. We're not necessarily looking for perfection, and we won't allow that to get in the way of progress.
Yeah, well, thank you,
So,
thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Trustee Smith?
Nothing.
I'm good.
You-
I promise not to bring it up.
Taxes. They're coming due.
Yeah.
Just a note, mentioned earlier that I had missed our last board meeting because of vacation. And then shortly after that, we were awarded from the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe the grant that was used to help fund the Lincoln Road project you were just referring to. And so I want to give express publicly our gratitude at Union Township. It makes it possible. And the gifts that they give out, not just to Union Township, but throughout our community and other communities, really makes a difference. And to be able to be part of those distribution meetings is really a blessing. If you've not had a chance to go, let me know that you have interest, and I'll let you know when the next one is, and you can join me there, because it's really something. Yeah. And the Native American culture, I hope I don't get this wrong because I'm no expert, but they have a tradition of gift giving. When you give a gift, you're expected to kind of get a gift back. It's normal to give that gift back, and it can be something very different, but it is very common to exchange gifts. And I really struggled with going to it this time, knowing that we were invited because we were being awarded something. How do you even gift anything back to that? Anyways, I want to point out that other than expressing our gratitude, that's all I can offer at this point. So anyways, it was a great experience. Just another note, I want to thank staff too, with regards to not just the private road ordinance, but as Mr. Stuhldreher mentioned, we've gone through a process over the last several years of reviewing some of our ordinances, trying to get them up to date. That was a priority set by this board some time ago through ends discussions and various other discussions with this board. And I know it takes a lot of time to go through that, so I'm grateful that through your busy jobs, your daily jobs, that you're able to find the time to go through that review process and modernize the ordinances that, guard our township. So thank you. And with that, our business is done. I'd be happy to entertain motions for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Support.
We have a motion by Rice, support by Brown to adjourn. Any discussion? I figured not. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 8:19 p.m.
Thank you, everybody.